Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Fireside Chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network by Run, Try, Bike. We have an amazing panel discussion scheduled for you today. I am going to be joined by three members of the 1980 class of Ironman finishers. And if that sounds like it is the first year, that is because it is. And I'll be joined by Kurt Madden, Bob Babbitt, and Dave McGilvory, who I just pronounced incorrectly even after asking Dave how to pronounce his last name. So I apologize to Dave in advance. They're going to be joining me to chat about that first year, their thoughts while doing it, and telling us great stories. I just spent the last 15 minutes laughing at all the great stories that they've been sharing, so I can't wait to get them on the show. But before we bring the panel forward, please remember to subscribe, rate, review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform. You can also leave a comment if you use Spotify for your podcast. There are 9 shows to choose from with various stories and hosts, and I'm sure you'll find one, or better yet, all of them to your liking. So let's bring the class of 1980 forward and have a wonderful conversation for the next 60 minutes. Bob, Dave, and Kurt, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot tell you how honored I am that you're on our show.
Oh, thank you very much. And actually, we were able to do the third ever Ironman.
Third
the
ever.
First one was in 78, 15 starters, 12 finishers, 79, 15 starters, 12 finishers. And then us, the 3 idiots you're looking at, decided, well, what the hell? And 108 of us started, and I think 94 finished, something like that, in 1980. Yeah.
So how does it go from 15 starters to 108? Like, what's the process for getting the word out there?
It was the Sports Illustrated, 1979 May issue of Sports Illustrated by Barry McDermott. And that's how I found out about it. I picked up Sports Illustrated and I went, whoa, 2.4 miles, 112, 26.2. My problem is I didn't own a bike and I didn't know how to swim. But I said,
so you were good to go.
I was good to go. I said, I gotta figure this out right up my alley.
You had one out of 3, which I think was more than we had.
Well, I had just run across the United States, so I thought, like, oh, I can do anything, like I can learn how to pedal a bicycle,
What could be a big deal about that?
I think, what was the entry fee? I think it was $10 or something like that. 25, yeah, $25.
John Collins, John created the event in 1978. He lost $25 year 1. He made $25 year 2 and retired even.
About what I'm doing right now with my company. So
exactly, our business model is that machine you put the dollar in and get 4 quarters back.
Yeah,
that's been my business model forever.
Yeah, and just Jason, so you know, Tom Warren, every year he did something called the Tugs Tavern, which he owned. It was a swim, run, swim. I lived in Pacific Beach. It was a no-brainer. It was like, okay, you show up on Thursday nights, you swim a half a mile around the pier, you run down the beach 5.5 miles. It was like a lifeguard competition, swim back around the pier, and then I think we got a taco, rice and beans. So I did it. I did it the first year. I didn't even train. I was like 30th. And then, Tommy comes over to me. He says, you might want to think about getting ready for this. So the next year I actually trained and I was 4th. And then he pulled me aside. And he pulled out the magazine. And he said, do you see me? I said, I do. He goes, you can swim and you can run. Just get yourself a bike. And that was the only event besides that swim, run, swim that I knew of. I mean, marathons were kind of happening. So hook, line, and sinker, I said, hey, what the heck?
Well, and for us, I was actually a school teacher in San Diego, and my roommate was a guy named Ned Overend, who went on to become world mountain bike champion, but mountain bikes hadn't been invented yet. That's how far back this goes. And so Ned and I met rock climbing in Baja, and then we read this article. And of course, you couldn't go online and sign up for it.
Right.
So Tom Warren was the focal point. We had done the Tug Swim Run Swim. So I called Tom up to figure out how to do this thing, how to get in it. So he goes, and these guys will totally get this. He was like, oh, Babbitt, come down to my office. I'll tell you all about this thing. And I'm like, where's your office? Well, it's on the west side of the street, just south of Crystal Pier. It's PB. So we go down. It's a parking lot, right? There's no buildings there. There's a motorhome. And the motorhome had a bike on the back. It had a surfboard on top. It had running shoes tied around the side view mirror. And I sort of stick my head in and he goes, Babbitt, welcome to my office. He had like a roll of dimes in his console and a payphone behind him. He'd order beer and order all chips for the bar. And he'd go run 5 miles. And there was a white lamppost for like at the turnaround at the jetty for his run, there's still to this day a black line from his grimy hand as he did that 5-mile run 8 million days in a row. And he like would put his hand on the thing as he made the turn. But he'd ride his bike up the Oceanside. He'd paddle out in the ocean, and he took us to his house, and he had a bike mounted in his sauna. Right? He's riding 5 hours a day in the sauna to get ready with the Ironman.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. So he said, step number
Guilty
one,
as
you guys got
charged.
to get a bike. So I'm like, these guys, I went to a police auction, $75 bike. I had the Radio Shack radio mounted to the handlebars. Had no idea how to change a flat tire, so I had solid rubber tires and put a pannier sleeping bag antenna on the bike because I thought you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, rode back the next day. Into the marathon. And Dave McGilvery, when they told us we had to get a crew, Dave showed up with nobody. I think he just got a Honolulu phone book and called somebody.
Well, that's what happened. Yeah, we showed up to the technical meeting at the Nautilus Fitness Center a couple of days before, and they said, "Where's your support crew?" I said, "What do you mean support crew?" "Well, how the hell are you going to find your way around the course, and how are you going to get water?" I said, "Well, aren't there any directional signs?" "No." "Aren't there any water stations?" "No." They said, "Well," I said, "What am I supposed to do?" He threw the phone book at me. He said, "Call somebody." So I'm dialing for dollars, calling people. I got a Navy SEAL and his 12-year-old daughter to crew for me. And they come to my hotel the morning of in a little Honda Civic. I had to take my bike, put it on the roof, roll down the window, hold the bike on the roof for the ride to the start at Ala Moana Canal or wherever the hell we started, and lean the bike against a tree. And then do you remember, guys, that they said if we had lost more than 10% of our body weight during the course of the race, we were pulled from the race. So they weighed us in on a scale before we get in the water. Then they weighed us in off the bike. And then they weighed us in twice on the run. And the funny part, you're running up to the scale and there's 3 guys in front of you and you're waiting. Come on, let's go. I got a race to run. And that's what they did back in those days. Very different.
Well, and we had no idea what to eat. So I had Hawaiian sweetbread and Gatorade, and I was a school teacher. So one of the kids I taught, her dad lived over in Honolulu. He shows up, a little Fiat convertible, and his 2 girlfriends to crew for me. And I tossed him like 30 loaves of Hawaiian sweetbread and Gatorade. And my mile 25 of the bike ride, I'm like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the world. I can't believe I got through to swim. And they're on the side of the road handing me a Big Mac fries and a Coke at mile 25 and root beer snow cone at 90. And then when I got off the bike, they had a bamboo mat laid out, and they're like, "Are you a little tight?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I got a 45-minute massage between the bike and the run. And then I'm waddling through Waikiki, eating Hawaiian sweetbread and drinking Gatorade. I had been weighed before I started the run, and then we had to get on the scale at about mile 5. And I can hear the guy on a walkie-talkie goes, "Can you give me that again?" The guy's gained 4 pounds. He can't gain weight doing this. Mm-hmm. What happened with you, Kurt? Who crewed for you?
Mm-hmm.
I had Kelly and I had 2 other people, and we actually, it was amazing. Is that I went to a bike shop. Bob, I've told you this story, but it's funny. I pulled the bike shop, and the guy's looking at my bike over. He goes, "Do you want to go faster?" I said, "Absolutely." He says, "I'll put toe clips on here." I said, "What a concept. That would be great." I had Nike waffle trainers.
Yep.
And I put toe clips. It was at Windsor. I must have weighed 55 pounds. I could have worked out with that thing and done that. So everything was good. We put an extra bike up on the top, Bob, just like you. I think it was so primitive about changing tires. I flatted it at mile 110 and just rotored in on the rim all the way to the Aloha Tower. So yeah, it was hysterical because Jason said, it was an open course. Now, Oahu of all islands, an open course, that is catastrophic.
Through Pearl Harbor, remember that?
Oh yeah.
The traffic.
Oh yeah. And then to top it off, when we got off the bike, they gave us a thing like this. This is like
a map.
Follow the run. Follow the run course. Now, Jason, to give you context, back in the day, you can look this up on Wikipedia. There was something called dolphin shorts.
Yes.
I wore them.
I had my dolphin shorts on. I'm looking at this map, and I'm trying to figure out all these signs. I lost my crew. I see this big Hawaiian over there, and he's sitting on the corner. I said, "Bro, which way do I go?" He just took a big toke off a big O doobie. And he's like, "Dude, you go that way, bro." And I go, "Shakalo, bro." I just took, that was it. That was it right there.
So
That's crazy.
My buddy Ned, his girlfriend, soon to become his wife, was his crew. She lost him at mile 3 of the bike and found at mile 90. He's drinking. He's in a median strip, drinking out of sprinklers, right? And I saw him after the race when I walked into the hotel room and the moon was coming through. His back was like lobster red, and he just rolled over and goes, "I didn't see her all day long." And I was like, "Oh, trying to do that thing without a crew, awful."
So, like, were the crew just driving to places and parking and waiting for people to come by?
Yeah.
And hopefully you didn't go by them and then not see you.
Well, that's what happened with me. Same thing. I lost my crew. And then one of my friends, Hal, was with his wife. And I'm standing off my bike because I had no water, no nothing, didn't know which way to go. Clock's ticking. And all of a sudden, there goes Hal and there goes his wife right by me. I'm screaming and yelling. And like, they could care less about me. They're
racing.
They're racing. And so I had to stand there for like a half hour before the guy found me. So we all have those same stories.
So you would have won, Dave.
Yeah, I would have won. Yeah.
There were no aid stations on the run course. Is that correct?
There was no aid stations anywhere.
No, nothing. There's nothing.
So then
you went out there right now.
It's sort of like an outlaw event. I don't know if there are any permits whatsoever. In fact, years later, I put on an event on the course called Ironman Revisited. We went back to that course to do a fundraiser for our foundation. And John Collins, his wife, Judy, wanted to do the race. So there was no cutoff times. It's like, we're talking 2 a.m. Judy is running up Diamond Head.
Yeah, where the finish was.
John is crewing for her from behind in a car. And I get a call from the police saying, we have a report of some guy stalking a woman as she's running up Diamond Head. The creator of the Ironman is about to be arrested for stalking his wife because we're recreating this silly Ironman event. It was crazy.
Boy. Do you remember who was there that was of celebrity status that was there covering the race? ABC.
Jim Lampley and Diana Nyad.
Diana Nyad, right. So that was the great part. You asked about how did it grow? Well, it grew from 79 to 80 because of the Sports Illustrated article. Yes. And then it grew 80 on because it was covered by Wide World of Sports, and Diana Nyad was one of the commentators. And they took us a couple of days before on a bus tour of the course, kind of a thing. And that's where I met her for the first time. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
The funny part about that tour, they took us on this tour of the island. And one guy who was a real athlete, and besides Dave Scott, who won overall, but who had real pedigree, was John Howard. John Howard
on the bike.
Cyclist of the 70s, 3-time Olympian, Pan American Games gold medalist. And this guy could ride a bike, right? He couldn't swim at all. I think his swim time was 1:52, right? He's still out there. But he was obviously a world-class cyclist. So as we're driving around the island, and none of us have any experience on a bike, we do this thing called Three Hanky Hill at about mile 80 or something. And John, of course, trying to get people to slow down the bike a little bit, goes, this hill's pretty steep. I would walk this if I were you guys. It's like, yeah, thanks, John. That's a big help. and speaking of ABC, what happened was they decided they were going to be over there for cliff diving, and they were going to cover the Ironman. The problem was, and these guys remember the meeting the night before the race, the waves, this Grand Otani Hotel, the waves are breaking 10 feet up on the wall. If
we changed the swim,
Dave and I would have died. There's no way we got through this thing. So I'm standing with Ned going, nice knowing you. We did all of our swimming in 120 lengths in a mile.
Cool.
Today's our last day on Earth. We'll be dying tomorrow morning at about 7 a.m. They bring us in and they go, listen, ABC Wide World of Sports is here. And if I have to delay the race a day, like last year, they had to delay it a day because the storms were so big, I'm going to lose ABC. So I'm going to move the swim to Ala Moana Channel.
Channel.
And of course, Kurt Madden and all the real swimmers are like, what a pussy event. You can't move the swim. While Dave and I and the rest of us who couldn't swim were like, yeah, you can't move the swim knowing we're going to live. This is the greatest thing ever. This is the great. But anyways, ABC was there and they called John Collins and said, we would like to film your event. And John, not being the most public relations conscious guy in the world, said, I don't know why you guys would want to film this thing. For the first hour, they're underwater. Then they ride out in the middle of nowhere, and then they
Literally.
run in the dark. And so they're like, John, I don't know how you can make this thing interesting. It's like watching grass grow. This is what the guy who's representing the event is telling ABC Wildlife Sports. And they're like, you know what, John, we can pretty much make anything interesting.
Well, they clearly did a great job because it's grown to this point today. Kurt, I want to ask you a question because you are the one who got these two guys together for me after you and I had a chat on the Fireside Chat a number of months ago. And you were telling such great stories back then too. Today, there's technology. We could look at our watches. We could do all of these things today. We can even get updates on where people are on the course, right? Like this person's a minute ahead of you, 2 minutes ahead of you. Like when you're doing this event in 1980 and there's none of this stuff is existing, are you just out there blind hauling ass as much as you can and we'll figure it out when we cross the finish line type of thing?
It probably depends upon the athlete. I
Training.
think just like today, it was the super competitive group, the moderately competitive, and I just want to finish this puppy. And I think we at that time, and I'm not sure, and Bob and Dave can weigh in on that, but I think we saw that spectrum. I know that I was
Absolutely
super competitive until John Howard went by me at like 80 miles an hour.
He was going so fast.
And then I was humbled. I'm like, whoa, I think I just got my rear end handed to me. But it's not over yet. So yeah, it was all out. But I think it was kind of the adventure of this is like really cool. We're on an open course. Our crew is following us. And again, they couldn't give us too much intel. We really got spread out until the marathon and the things started bunching up. But no, it was enjoyable. It was great. It was kind of like, and Bob and I are closer than say Dave and I, but it was back then, it was just the adventure of doing something like this. And that's all it was. It was just like we say today, we wanted to swim, bike, run, and have some fun. And it didn't have all the sophistication of where we are today. Now, it had to evolve over time because we had a lot of cleanup to do. As you can see, it's just like any pioneers. It's like we created that path, just like no cutoff. Why would you have a cutoff? Just do it. And when you're done, you're done. And we'll think that you didn't cheat or things like that. So I think in a way that competitive spirit, that's how it was born. And that was the beauty of that time.
So when
you mentioned, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to ask, when you finished, was it an idea of, I can't wait to come back next year, or this adventure is done and I'm moving on to the next adventure?
I'll tell you, for me, when I was running up Diamond Head, because I was thinking I was going to do 2 days, and then my little Fiat convertible is behind me, right, with the dad and his girlfriends in the car, and they're lighting up the road, and I'm thinking as I'm running up Diamond Head before we drop into Kapiolani Park, I'm thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. There's gonna be cheerleaders. There's gonna be bands. I can't wait to see what they got at the finish for us. It's gonna be great. I come rolling into the park. I see a light bulb overhead, a chalk line, and I hear a voice in the darkness. Hey, you. Yeah. You in the race? Yeah. You're done. That was it. There was one guy doing 1-arm push-ups in the park and me. Right. That was it. But it was like, and I know you guys felt the same way. There was something about that finish. There was something about doing something you didn't think you could do. Like when Dave ran across America and Kurt did all those ultra 100-mile trail, Leadville, all that stuff. When you do something you didn't think you could physically, mentally, and emotionally do, it changes you for the better. Yeah. It makes you better at everything you do in life. And I vowed from when I finished that race that this sport is special. And I went to work for Mike Plant at Running News. I left teaching and convinced him to change the name to Running and Triathlon News based on the 108 of us who had done this silly thing. And then that led to Competitor Magazine and everything that followed. But when you think about a sport that started in 74 and by 94, 20 years later, was accepted into the Olympic Games and premiered in 2000 in the Olympic Games, you're talking a sport on the fast track.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. And all of a sudden is in the Olympic Games. And now there's Kurt, 140 Ironman branded events around the world. It's crazy.
Dave, why don't you go next? Then I'll talk about my.
No, I mean, you asked Jason about once we finish, a lot of times when you run your first marathon, halfway, 3/4, as you're approaching the finish line, you're saying never again, never again. You cross the finish line, never again. And 10 minutes later, you say, next year I'm going to, and you come back, right? It's just human nature to want to better your time and have a more positive experience. So that's what happened with me. I did it in 80, and then I did it in 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, and 89. So I did it 8 times in the 1980s. And, again, back here in New England, there were no triathlons, right? So I did 1980 Ironman, then I came home, and then I created a whole bunch of triathlons in New England, did the second Ironman distance triathlon in the world, I think at that time, the Cape Cod Endurance on the Cape. And, Scott Molina came and won it, Aaron Baker came and won it, and all these Mark Serpinant, and, we could talk about all those guys from the past, but that was my life. Triathlon, especially someone from the East Coast, there weren't many of us. West Coast, they're all over the place. East Coast, not a clue. One funny story, I was doing, I think it was 84 Ironman, and the transition bike to run was at the Kona Surf. And you get off your bike, and they take your bike and give you your bag, or you get your bag, and then they direct you to the changing area. So this guy directs me to the changing area, and I go in, and he directed me to the women's changing area.
Good man.
Right? So I'm standing there, and there's probably 20 naked women in the room. They could care less that I was in there. And my transition time was about an hour and a half.
There we go. There you go.
I said, I'm not leaving here anytime soon. So I kept on saying to myself, I know I can do better, because I'm not going to have an hour and a half transition again next year. So a lot of funny stories when you add it all up. Yeah.
Well, and when Dave talks about 19, but in 78, 79, 80, 81, and in February 82, the event was in the winter. So you really couldn't train for it if you were back east. And it wasn't until the Julie Moss crawl and the following, they ended up doing 2 events in 82, moving it to October because of the excitement around the sport, creation of the United States Triathlon Series. There was so much that happened after the Julie. When you talk about the Sports Illustrated article, then ABC Wide World of Sports, then Julie's crawl. That's our progression of making the sport gigantic.
Yeah, and then Jason, back to your question, and preparation for this, I thought about it, and I'm like, I can remember that event vividly to this day. It's just amazing how this one event in your life, it's a significant event. And just like Bob said, Capilano Park, it wasn't like a Leahy Drive. But you still had that feeling of like, what is happening right now that I somehow got through this swim? I went all the way around to Oahu. At that time, if you think of the number of people on the planet, and in endurance sports, it was very few. And then to run the Waikiki Marathon. And I remember finishing it, and it wasn't, I think there was maybe 50 people there, but Jim Lampley was there, and Diane and I, so they made it all special. But the first thing I remember, Bob, was that even Kelly and my crew, they're like, I can do this. And I go, oh, no, slow down. I just took one for the team. This is a little bit more difficult, but the challenge I had, and Bob, I remember the date, it was January the 12th. My anniversary was the very next day. I told my charming wife after only 1 year of, this is our year anniversary. Tomorrow might not be as special as you want it to be, because I'm hurting from head to toe. But it really did change me. And I think you had to kind of be there to experience it when you go through adversity together, that it really shaped me as a person. I think if I had 3 things in my life that really were impactful in a good way, that if we knew back then what we are doing today, that here it is, it's 2025. We're still hanging out, doing good stuff. We think, taking it one day at a time. Every day is a gift. Every day is an opportunity. That one event right there, it really transformed you. And it was well worth the suffering and everything we did, just like it happens today. And that's the beauty of our sport, is I interview coaches. I interview athletes. I even asked this in a mastermind session. I said, the opening question for the icebreaker: if you could come across the finish line at the World Championship on a Leahy Drive, who would you want to be with you? Instant emotion. 80% of the people start crying. I said, hold on. They're going, no, it just sparked this emotion in me. And I think that event for me was kind of the same feeling.
What was interesting, Kurt, you can relate to this. This past year's Ironman 2024, there's 2,400 of us standing on on a leahy, ready to win the water. There were only 2 of the 2,400 that had done probably a triathlon, but at least an Ironman in no earlier than us 2.
Right.
Because I don't think there was anyone else in that race this past year that had done 80 or earlier, 78,
Nope.
79. So
Nope.
I'm standing, I'm looking around going, I have done this race before any one of you people stand. You didn't even, first of all, not 3/4 of you
They weren't born.
They weren't even born. But none of you knew what a triathlon was. None of you, nothing. And Kurt and I are the only 2 in this entire race of 2,400 people that has done this back in 1980. It was like, I took that away from me. Thought that was pretty cool to be able to still be able, so many years later, do this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's funny, Jason, when you look at why we went, the article kept talking about this hole in the head trophy. This is what we went for, right? The hole in the head trophy. Tom Warren was on Johnny Carson with this, and Johnny. So how much money did you get paid for doing this, Tommy?
Yes.
Nothing. And then he turns it upside down, and there's a screw missing, and he's like, "Now I know why you do this. There's a screw missing." But
and there's a nut on the top.
We got a seashell. We got ripped off. We go and do the Ironman.
We got a seashell.
And Kurt's probably got his right there too. We've
There
got
it is.
a seashell. What are the odds that we all have these seashells? But you think about how many events we've all done over the years, and how much stuff do you keep from other events? And I mean, I've got the seashell. I've got the results. I've got the Sports Illustrated. I've got the Radio Shack radio. I've got the calendar. Everything. The number. My race number was number 3, I think. Yes.
I have to imagine that when you walk into your offices and you see that memorabilia from 1980, like the flood of that is, I will tell you, Bob, I have a Western States bib from 2019 that looks worse than that one.
Yeah.
Like it looks way worse.
Such a low number. That's what I want to know.
Because I set my money in third. I got my $25 as a third guy to say you weren't seated, right?
You bum.
The funniest, I don't know if I ever told you guys this. So I had this bike, the Centurion with the flat proof tires and
me too.
The Radio Shack radio. And we didn't have bike boxes back then. I just rolled it onto the plane. And so this thing comes rolling off in Honolulu Airport. And there's all these Navy SEALs, Laddie Shaw, Bill McKean, all these guys who were doing the race. Well, I had a big old black beard at the time. And I looked like Gordon Haller, who had won in 1978. So these guys see me, see this bike, and think that bike won the Ironman. They're looking at this bike like they're looking at Lance Armstrong's bike. I go, oh, look at, he's got these cages that he puts his feet in. It was wild. We had no idea. And there was some crazy people. Remember Born Again Smitty?
Of course.
Born Again Smitty was at the airport when we flew in, chanting about Jesus and Jesus is going to save you. And then we go to the meeting for the event and he's doing the race.
He's doing the race.
And he got hit by a side view mirror while he was riding the bike. He's all bloody. He gets up and he ran like a 3:30 marathon off the bike. It was a lot of different type of characters who were doing that.
Remember the name of the woman who won? What was her name? Remember?
Robin Beck.
Robin
disappeared off the face of the earth. I can't
Salt
find
Lake
her.
City, I think, Utah she was from,
She was from there, but I have looked everywhere
to
find her because there was Lynn Lemaire was the first woman to do the event in '79.
The year before.
And Lynn is sort of in double secret hiding.
She's from Boston or Harvard.
Yeah, she's in Boston area, but she refuses to do interviews and anyway.
Really.
And then Robin Beck is MIA. I have no idea where she's at.
Wow.
You mentioned
the woman who won in '81, Linda Sweeney. Yeah. Linda Sweeney. She came out of the water. She was a runner. She came out of the water. She took her towel and put it in her basket that was on the front of the bike. She had her cassette player playing White Punks on Dope for 112 miles. And she ends up winning the race. That's the only triathlon she has ever done in her entire life. She didn't come back to defend. That was it. And a number of years ago, she called me up and goes, "Hey, Bob, I'm moving and I've got this bike that I won the Ironman on. I was going to throw it away, but my husband said you might want it. It's in my other room. It's the bike that she won the '81 Ironman on." Crazy.
You sort of answered my question because Dave, you referenced earlier that, on the East Coast, people don't know what triathlon is. This article comes out in Sports Illustrated and then ABC covers it. Do you guys remember athletes in 1980 at the start line who had zero clue what a triathlon was?
Besides me?
Yeah, me.
Yeah. There was a bunch of us. Well, this guy, here's one
We
guy.
were just hackers. I mean,
Incredible Huck.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
the only
Incredible
guy there
Huck.
with sponsorship. He was 59 years old, and his claim to fame is he'd run the Athens Marathon back to back to back in one day. One problem, he didn't know how to swim. So they put us in the water, and we're trying to stay as shallow as possible. I swim down. It was 4 lengths. On my way back, I'm
You
staying
can't
as shallow
see.
as possible. I basically just about running the Huck, who's walking the swim. He's walking and moving his arms. 2.4 miles. He's the only guy in the history of Ironman to get blisters on his feet during the swim. Right? And then they lose him. There was no cutoff times back then. They lose him in the middle of the night. They find him in a diner in Waikiki at like 1 in the morning having a snack. Right? It was a little bit of the wild, wild west back then.
a little.
A lot.
Kurt, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have somebody else in mind?
Well, no, he's the same guy. My wife Kelly tells the same story, and I think it was actually at the pre-race meeting. Like, was there any questions?
Yeah.
He says, "What do you do if you can't swim?" And so look at the whole. Try to imagine this. On this end, you've got Dave Scott. I mean, a flat out stud, and then you got the incredible Huck, and Dave's like, "Whoa, where'd that come from?"
And when Dave was interviewed by Lampley, because everybody kept telling him, this is the guy. This guy does this Ironman stuff basically for breakfast every day in Davis, California. He was a water polo player, and he was known for just working out so hard, but he didn't have genetics to be a great swimmer, to be a world-class swimmer. He didn't have the genetics to be a great water polo player. But what he had was what triathlon takes, which is the ability to suffer and the ability to string workout days together. So when Lampley said, "So Dave, what's your claim to fame?" He says, "Well, I haven't really run a marathon. I guess I can swim and ride a little bit." I mean, that was it. And Lampley's like, this is the guy who's supposed to be so good.
Win.
And then he
Remember his support crew?
Oh yeah, mom and dad, station wagon,
Burn and die
on the roof of the car.
That's it.
The best was the movie Breaking Away had come out in '79, and I don't know if you guys remember, but Dave Stoller during the Little 500. They had to duct tape his foot to the pedal because the pedal had broken. So Dave's pedal broke, and they duct taped his foot to the pedal for 112 miles of that race. And the TV had no idea. You see Dave get off his bike and walk back towards the bushes. And of course, the TV cameras are like, "What's going on? What's going on? What he's going to take? He's going to go to the bathroom." And so they go to interview his dad, Vern. And it's like, is he okay? Is he okay? Yes, he just had to take care of something. He should be back soon.
Crazy.
This show is live, and so we're getting questions in from Instagram. And one of the questions is, where actually did you put your bike when you were on the plane? Like, did you actually have it in the aisles?
No, we rolled it into the cargo area. They directed us to the cargo area, and you handed it to a guy. I don't know what you guys did, but I just rolled it over there. I think they didn't have like bike bags. I think they had bike boxes.
I put mine in a box. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I just rolled it in.
Yeah,
that was good. But we had no idea what we were doing. We were actually in Maui leading into that race, and I didn't know if I'd be able to get to Oahu because the storms were so bad. And seriously, if they had done the race, if we had to do the Waikiki rough water swim, I never would have finished that race. There's no way. There's no way. Yeah. Dave and Kurt would have finished it. Dave Scott and Kurt would have finished the race. The rest of us would be floating somewhere in the Pacific. We'd be towards
in the Pacific Ocean.
In today's world, we'll talk about recovery food and all these protein things and protein that stuff and whatever. Like, when you guys finished the race, like, were you headed for burritos? Like, what were you eating afterwards? Like, I gotta know what the meal after you were finished was.
I think I didn't, because I finished, like, I was over 14 hours. So I just went home and I went back to the hotel and crashed in the morning, went out and had a breakfast buffet. And I think we stayed there for about 6 hours.
Kurt, Kurt, you finished
Yeah,
in 11 hours, so you were probably around 6 p.m. So dinner time.
Yeah. So I remember we went back to the hotel. They put me in the bathtub for about a half an hour. Then we went to Chuck's Steakhouse. There used to be one in
Yes.
San Diego. So we went to Chuck's
Yeah.
Steakhouse. Then I think I might have had a steak. I can't really remember exactly, but some protein. And then it took everyone on my crew to get me out of the chair. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just insane. So yeah, but I think it was the next day where you start to wake up like, oh, my world has changed.
You know what's cool, Kurt? When I look at these results, you had Gordon Haller, the 78 champion, one spot in front of you, and then Tom Warren was in fourth, right? So that's pretty cool company to be in. And then John Howard, who would win the next year. So John Howard, his splits were an hour 51. Kurt beat him by an hour in the swim. Then he went 4:28 for the bike, a course record on the bike with no roads blocked off, with no lights blocked off, and that stood for till Jürgen Zach broke it in the 90s. And then he ran a 4:13 marathon. But the cool thing was he thought he could win because he's a one sport athlete, because he was a great cyclist. And what Dave Scott proved is you had to be a triathlete. And the following year, John Howard became a swimmer, became a runner, and won the Ironman in 81 by training as a triathlete. And that showed you couldn't just have one strength. You had to be well-rounded and do it all.
Yeah.
You mentioned the lights, and Dave, you sent me pictures of the first handwritten rules, or the handwritten rules from 1980, which is absolutely amazing. And the first question I have is like, how did you agree to this? Because today you press register and you just, I'm in and I approve all these rules. Like, you handed the $25 and you said, yeah, I'm good with the rules.
I never read them. Rules.
They really weren't rules.
Did you see what we looked like back then? Revolutionaries. I was Che Guevara on a bike.
You did? Oh my, that's a great.
Yeah.
I'm not following any freaking badges. We don't need no badges. We're not doing any of that crap. We're going out here. We'll do whatever the hell we wanted. We sort of did.
Yeah.
It wasn't, there was nobody telling us what not to do. Back then it was sort of honor rule where they didn't have any people on the course to see if you ran a stop sign or stop light. John Howard, I don't think ever saw a stoplight that he wasn't going to run through.
Well, that's the thing that's on the rules that Dave sent me. It said, don't cheat. You're the only one who would probably know, but you are the only one who really cares if you finish, which I thought was really amazing to have that.
Yeah.
And it actually
let your conscience be your guide, kind of a philosophy behind it.
Yeah. And it says no jumping traffic lights, no pacing with vehicles, no riding in a vehicle, no drafting on the bike. For the run, no bikes or skateboards or et cetera. I don't know what et cetera would be. Roller skates, I guess, at that point.
That's no different than a lot of the, adventure stuff. That's like when I ran across the country, it wasn't like anybody was checking to see if I ran all the way or if I took a cab or jumped in the motorhome. So it was the honor system, right? And we were so serious about our athleticism and wanting to accomplish our goal, it never even remotely entered my mind to cheat, to take advantage, anything like that. Like I remember when I was doing the run, I'd finish during the day, I'd run 45, 50 miles a day, I'd finish, and then I'd mark the road where I finished, go sleep for the night, come back, and then my guys would say, okay, you can start right here. I said, no, I'm going to start further back. Yeah. For some stupid reason, because I want to be 1,000% sure that I run every inch of this country. So I think that that's the mentality of these people, that they're going to be honest because they got to live with themselves when it's all said and done. Not everyone's that way, but I think the majority are.
Yeah. I think what really hit us, Jason, and you guys will relate to this because Dave did the races all throughout the 80s and Kurt's done them forever. It was totally the honor rule. And if somebody was drafting during that Ironman bike ride, I'm not talking 80. I'm talking as we got into 82, 83, 84, and there were draft packs and those. It was like getting a morals charge. I mean, it was just, why would anybody even? It's you against you. It's you against the course. Yeah. Why would anybody sit on somebody's wheel to get an advantage? It was just incomprehensible that people would do that. Well, it's not incomprehensible now because that's what people do. They're looking for an advantage. But back then, it was really verboten to do anything like that, to try to take advantage and get by the rules. People we were doing it for ourselves, and we didn't care. And I remember when we had those big draft packs on the Queen Highway, and it was just like, oh my God, who are these people? What are they doing to our sport? It really bothered me.
And I'm going to add to that too. I think, Jason, to give our listeners context, I think it was just for the pure accomplishment of doing the sport. That was it.
Yep.
I mean, it was just really pure and just kind of like virgin-like almost. And then again, I will fast forward this. I did the Ohana event on Saturday.
Yeah,
And what really
congratulations, by
literally,
the way.
well,
Yeah.
thank you. What really blew my mind is the swim was epic. On the bike course, I did not see one marshal, and I did not see one person drafting.
Yep.
This is 2025. I did not see one person drafting
Very cool.
the whole time. And when I went by the penalty tent at the very end, I said to myself, for this event, they probably don't need it out there now. If I take all the events that I've done, that is almost unheard of because it's a different vibe, the Ohana vibe, and it's a 20-year anniversary. But that touched my heart to say, you know what, we still have some really good things happening. And I know when people get competitive and they're after a world slot and like, what's a 2-minute penalty if I'm drafting? I'll kind of do it until I get caught because I can save my wattage. I can run a lot faster. That just really warmed my heart when I saw that. I said, that is really, really nice to see.
What 80 did for me too is not only from an athletic perspective, but it made me think about the business of event management. And experiencing 80, I was like, I'm going to take this home and create my own events. So I did, and I created the New England Triathlon Series. I did the USTS races here in Boston, and then I bid on the World Championship, the second World Championship, which the first one was in Avignon, France in '89. And then 1990, the U.S. got the bid, and so I bid with U.S. With Kyle Thomas and Jim Curl, and we got the bid, and we put it on at Walt Disney World in Florida, and the list goes on and on and on. Then started representing all these athletes. Murphy had a bunch of guys. I had a bunch, the Mike Pigs and the Dave Scotts and the Karen Smyers, and it just became a business, and Ironman was the one that was the event that sort of inspired us all to go in that direction. Otherwise, I would have never touched the sport of triathlon.
One of my favorite stories from that second ever World Championship, down at the Dave put on with Carl Thomas. Disney is famous for, you put on an event there, and they're going to figure out how to make more money from you. Well, Dave, did they charge you guys $37,000 for sand displacement?
They charged. I got a bill for almost $300,000 from Disney, and $37,000 was replacing the sand, that on the beach that people left with. It took me like 6 months to defend it, and I said, I'm not paying this. Every time I went back to Disney, I thought I was going to be thrown in Mickey Mouse jail or something because they're after me. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. That was
Minnie and Mickey got to eat. Clearly.
But look at that. So it's funny about triathlon because I put that triathlon on at Walt Disney World. There had never been, a endurance event on their property ever before this. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, they called me and they said, we're thinking of putting on a marathon here. Would you be our race director? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I can do Boston in April and this thing in like January. Shame on me. Why'd I do that? Now look at Run Disney and everything else. But that triathlon spawned all that Run Disney stuff.
Well, and I put on my Muddy Buddy series at Disney World. That was the greatest thing ever. And I learned that lesson again because my race director was Michael Epstein. And Michael says to me, Bob, you're having to pay to block off a lane of traffic, even though your guys are going to be riding a mountain bike 150 yards from the lane, from the road. They're blocking off a lane and charging you to block off that lane. Plus, see the perimeter of our area? Here's the binoculars. See the second perimeter that Disney created that you're paying for on the other side of your perimeter? I was like, Disney's a money-making machine, man. They know how to do it.
Right.
Oh, God.
Jason, can we talk just for a couple of minutes about nutrition? Because I think this will be really good.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was gonna bring up training for the next year, because Bob has a calendar and he's like, look, I ran 7 miles this day, 4 miles this day, and then Ironman. So perfect segue. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah. So we know today, if we start and then do our backward mapping, that today, again, if we look at sign of the Ironman events, it's very sophisticated. You know exactly what you're going to have on the bike course, you know, the whole rhythm of it, the cadence, same thing on the run. I mean, you are good to go. Back then it was very different. And I know there was a couple things, Bob, I can't remember, there was some guys from San Diego. What they did, this is actually true. They went to Safeway, they bought 75 pounds of bananas.
Right.
They came in with, I mean, 75 pounds, I'm talking.
A lot.
It was, and their mindset was, I'm just going to eat bananas all week. And I'm like, man, you guys are going to be bananaed out. Chuck Newman was an underwater demolition SEAL. And you know what? I have so much respect for Chuck. He is the man. If you want someone in your foxhole, bring Chuck Newman, because he's going to take care of business.
Yeah.
So Chuck does the whole event. And then I said, so Chuck, what'd you do for your nutrition? He goes, you know, I didn't quite have it figured out. I go, well, what'd you do? And he goes, well, I had 3 cookies every mile. So if you do the math, I don't know if Chuck passed the math test, but if you go 3 cookies every mile times 25 or 26,
he had a lot of cookies.
He ate a lot of cookies. So understand where we have come from to where we are today. And Dave was popping figs left and right.
Figs.
That's why he had to do a couple stops. I tried that on one training session. I said, Dave, I bless you, brother. I cannot. Those things in me are not a good combination.
Well, so we were talking with Mark Allen. He was on the show and we were talking about nutrition. He says, well, I knew what Dave Scott did. He ate X number of figs. He ate 48 figs throughout the day. So on my 14th fig, the other 13 came up along with number 14. And I realized that figs and I don't really get along, right? But everybody was trying to, like, Dave was eating rice cakes. That's what he would have, rice cakes with peanut butter, and that's what he would have at home. And so, and he'd rinse his cottage cheese. It was before fat-free cottage cheese. He would put cottage cheese in a strainer and wash it off in the sink, wash all the fat off the cottage. But he was the guy who was winning. So a lot of people were trying to do what he was doing, even though he was a crazy person.
You know, there's ultra runners that are going to be listening to this that are going to say, yes, 3 cookies every mile sounds about right. Why wouldn't you do that?
I love somebody's note here is, damn, is this the Grandpa Club? Yes, it is.
Well, I had a note
Grandpa.
because in 1980, I was 7 years old.
Thanks for that. That's good.
You're welcome. And it wouldn't be until I think it was 2009 when I did my first triathlon. And my very first question when I was asked to do a triathlon was, what the fuck's a triathlon? I was born in New York, Dave, to your point, East Coast. I had no idea what a triathlon was. And I was told, well, you know, you swim, bike, and run. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm an athlete. I played ball. I could do this stuff. I'm a runner. And the story you said about the guy walking in the water,
Yep.
I walked my very first sprint try was a pool swim. So I walked almost half of it because I was like, I can't make it through this. But you got on the bike and the wind in your face, and it was immediately, I love this sport. Got into Olympic distance, half Ironman distance events. And it changes you as a person. Because doing the thing that you watched other people do and struggle with, right? The pictures on Wide World of Sports and NBC Sports that they showed are never of people looking golden and pretty. And, you know, they're struggling through the run and they're winning these events, but they're struggling. And you're thinking to yourself, that looks hard as shit, but let me try it anyway. And then go ahead, Dave.
One of the most inspiring moments for me at Ironman, and Bob, well, you all know. So I get a call from a guy by the name of Dick Hoyt. And Dick says, Dave, it's Dick. Yeah, what's up, Dick? Rick has a question for you. I said, what's that? He says, can you get us into the Ironman? I said, Dick, you've only done one triathlon, my Bay State in Boston. Like, how are you going to go from one triathlon to do the Ironman? He says, I don't know, but Rick says we have to do it. I called Valerie and I said, there's this duo couple that blah, blah. I explained it all. And I figured no way is she going to let them in. And she did.
You did.
So I went over and with them and stuff. And long story short, we go in the water, and I come out of the water. I get on the bike. I go to Javi. I turn around. I'm coming back. I'm seeing the cyclist coming towards us. I'm going, where the hell are the Hoyts? No Hoyts. Where are they? Where are the Hoyts? And then I get back to transition, and there are the Hoyts. And they didn't make
got sick.
They didn't get this. They didn't make the swim cutoff because Dick drank too much seed and got sick in the water and throwing up in the whole bit. So then, like 2 months later, I get a call from Dick. Dave, Rick has another question for you. I said, oh, Rick and his questions. Okay, what? He says, can you get us back into Ironman? I'm like, how are we going to get them back in when they didn't even finish their first one? Oh, Valerie, listen, they're the real deal. Trust me, you got to trust me. He just had a bad swim, blah, blah, blah. Let him in. And then all of a sudden, I do that race. I go to Javi. I'm coming back, and the final, cyclists are coming at us. And all of a sudden, there they are, the Hoyts. And that moment just solidified to me about the whole Arab movement, the adaptive movement that these people can you imagine? Listen to us, like getting all, riled up about how hard it is to do an Ironman. You do an Ironman, pulling a kid in a dinghy, putting him on the front of your bike, and then push him in a wheelchair. The entire 140 miles. Like, who would have thunk?
Well, not only that, we're talking on the bike with his weight, the bike's weight. Rick, they're 400 pounds.
Yeah.
He's like 400 pounds climbing up towards Javi. Plus, because he's going to be on the TV show, the camera crew in the chopper is coming down while Dick's trying to put water into Rick, and water, the big gooey Gatorade is all over everything. But Dave, funny story is in '88 when they came over for the first time. I'm staying in a ground floor condo, and the people upstairs are partying every night. And I'm like, God, it's loud. I go up one night, it's Dick and Rick. And I'm like, you think of Rick as some kid. Dick wasn't a kid. He is in his 20s or 30s, whatever he was. And those guys were drinking every night. I'm like, I kept telling Dick,
151
you
run.
Seed problems. You were hungover.
151 run in a Jello cup.
No, Bob, I was drunk. I wasn't drunk. I said, Dick, I was actually hanging on to your raft during the swim. You think that might have been a problem? You pulled it.
So we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to go back, Kurt, to you where we talked about the nutrition part of it with all the bananas. But you finish the race, you spend the next morning eating and everything else. And do you start thinking about 81 now? Like, how do I put a training plan together? How do I, get better at this event? When does that happen? And Bob and Dave, same question to you after Kurt answers.
Yeah, for me, I think it was such a lift. And at that time, just being married, I was literally trying to put food on the table, and there was no pro opportunity. And I think I just really settled in. So I did not race again until 1982. And I think it was good because it gave me time to kind of get my house in order. At the same time, we started a club in San Diego called the Phoenix Vitamin Team. And it was Bob, Mark Allen, Emilio DeSoto.
Ned Overend.
All the legends today. And then that gave us a chance to get a sponsorship from Nike. So when I came back in '82, I had the monthly stipend, I had my gear, and I was in a much better position to say, I know a little bit more about what I'm getting into. I've got some context. It was over on Kona. And for me, I think if I had to say what was my best race in my career, probably that day, because I was actually sixth in that event. So it took me about 24 years, but I couldn't fully commit to the sport yet because there wasn't enough opportunity to do much. I mean, I couldn't go train 25 hours a week, try to get food on the table. I was just married. That was not a good combination. So I held off a little bit.
Yeah.
Dave, I'll put that question to you.
I held off too, but for a different reason, and that is because I get into the sport from a professional business perspective, and I started putting on races all over the place. And that just ate up all my time. And, people would say to me, you're so lucky you're involved in an industry as a vocation where you can train all day. I said, I can't train all day. I said, this is a lot of work. This is very labor intensive producing these events, especially triathlon. I mean, a 5K road race, run down the road, turn a cone and come back. Maybe that's a little easier than putting on an Ironman distance triathlon or even an Olympic distance or whatever. So I didn't go back until 3 years later, until 83. But then I got hooked. And that's why I did it for the next 7 years. And then I didn't go back again until 2014. I went back, and it was so surreal to go from my last one in 89 to my next one in 2014, because there was 25 years or something, and the whole sport had changed, So I was so intimidated and so nervous just about, like, I don't belong here. Even though I was here before any of you, I don't belong here now. And then went back again last year for my 10th.
Yeah. And for me, similar to Dave, I looked at it as I love this sport. I saw it as an equal opportunity abuser. I saw it as a sport that if you're missing an arm, if you're missing a leg, if you're Dick and Rick Hoyt, if you're overweight, if you're tall, if you're short, anybody can do it, right? You don't need to have any type of skill set. Your skill set is you wore arm floaties as a kid, you had a paper route, and you played capture the flag. Those are your skill set. You didn't need be able to catch a ball, any of that type of crap. And then I just, with starting Competitor Magazine in 87, there was something about these athletes that I really wanted to showcase. I really felt the spotlight on a Dave Scott and a Mark Allen and a Paul Newby-Fraser and Kurt Madden and athletes like that the average person could relate to that. And we knew the sport was going to change their life for the better. So that became my mission in life, was to grow this sport by first a magazine, then a radio show, Competitor Radio, and just trying to share those stories. Because the thing that connects a dot with all of our athletes, your pros and your age grouper, every pro was an age grouper. Every pro started out going, God, this is pretty cool. I like it. And found out they had a skill set to be great. And my favorite is this woman, Sky Monch, who I interviewed her at Ironman St. George, at the 70-point Ironman St. George, and we're in Zion's Bank. And while I'm interviewing her, she goes, Bob, I was a teller at Zion's Bank. And I'm like, what? She says, yeah, when I was in college, my parents told me, one, they couldn't afford college for me. So I cleaned houses and I worked as a teller, graduated my CPA, owed nothing. And then she realized, I think I'm pretty good at this triathlon thing. And she can always go and be a CPA, and she will. But, it's like she's the same as any age grouper. They can relate to each other. And any age grouper who's doing a Kona can go up to Kurt after the race, who's one of the top, was a pro, and they rode and ran and swam in the same exact course on the same day. I can't go play with Tiger at the Masters. I can't go play with Federer at Wimbledon, but I can be in the water with Dave Scott or Mark Allen or Jan Frodeno or Kurt Madden at the Ironman World Championship and talk about what the wind was like at Hawaii, what was like in an energy lab. And there's a bond there that makes our sport special.
I think what you guys have done in the last hour for myself and for our audience that's listening is provided perspective. We've talked about, I thought it was a 2-day event. We talked about, I had no idea what a triathlon was. We talked about, not having aid stations and crew chasing us around all over the place. where we think today, it's like, well, there's got to be an aid station. There's going to be one every mile, and I'll be able to take, 7 ounces of electrolytes and 3 salt pills and whatever other, mathematics we're doing to make ourselves get around the course and to the finish line. But it's perspective, right? It really is what you guys have given me, and I cannot thank you enough for being gracious with your time in chatting with us and providing me laughs. Like this is our 168th or 169th episode of the Fireside Chat that we've done. And I don't know that I've laughed as much as I did today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your guys' time. If there's anything anybody wants to say as a parting gift for our audience, please do.
I'm proud to be in the same club with these two guys, with Dave and with Kurt and with Ned Overend and with Dave Scott. And you look at all of us are still intimately involved with this crazy sport, 45 years later. And that says something about the sport that we love it so much.
Dave, how about you?
I guess just, again, we're so fortunate to be able to do what we do. And, I don't know anyone on your listening audience, but I know we all have something in common. And that is, we woke up this morning and not everyone else did. And
Right.
that's a gift. And so we need to take advantage of the fact that we woke up this morning. You didn't have anything to do with that, but what happens during the rest of the day is in your hands. And for me, long story short, I ended up having open heart triple bypass surgery. And I realized at the young age of 63 that I learned a lesson. And the lesson was, just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy. And
Yes.
other people are going through that right now, as we all know. And so the idea here is that, okay, train, do triathlons, do marathons, do ultras, do whatever you want to do, but pay attention to your own body. And, if you feel something, say something. We're fit athletes, but we're not invincible.
Yeah.
One other quickie, Jason, if it's okay. For me, the triathlon, the Ironman and triathlon led to the creation of our Challenge Athletes Foundation. And that now we've raised $191 million and sent out over 52,000 grants to challenged athletes in 73 countries, all 50 states, 105 different sports. And it just shows we have a small sport with a huge heart. It's a sport that changes lives for the better every single day. And I've seen it. I've seen our athletes performing in Kona, and they change perceptions. They change perceptions about what somebody can do with whatever limits they're dealing with. So that's what makes our sport special.
Yeah, and I think, Jason, I'll go ahead and answer very similar to what Dave and Bob have shared, that, as we go through life, embrace those challenges and don't have any regrets, because we never know what tomorrow might bring.
Absolutely.
And if it tests you a little bit and you get a little bit upset and you get a little frustrated, that is A-okay, because I think you're going to grow and expand and have no regrets when you go through those adverse moments of life, those adverse moments of a race. We're like, what in the heck is going on? I don't deserve this. But you know what? It's important. And like, we know that, as Dave has shared with me, we're like kids. We swim, we bike, we run. We're just a little bit older now. Like Bob has said, that really our sport is the fountain of youth. Because every time I go to an awards ceremony, even with my wife, she goes, that woman can't be 60 years old.
Right.
No, she actually is. No, that one is 62 and that one's 65. No, she looks like 40. So we need to move. And whatever you're doing, if you can't swim, bike, and run, I want you to float, coast, and then shuffle.
Exactly.
Well
Well said, Curtis.
I love it. And with that, we'll end our show. I want to thank our audience for joining me today. Time is the greatest gift that you can give to anybody. And Bob, Dave, and Kurt gave us their time, and I am super appreciative of it. Join us next week on the next Fireside Chat, which will be at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And we will be talking, with Sean Roach, who is the founder of Alethea Run. And you can read some of his articles on our website. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.